This is a real honor and very exciting. We're going to be having a discussion about happiness. And Tal, I wanted to ask you, I know that you speak often about an important aspect of happiness is giving oneself permission to be human. And I think that's just such a fascinating idea because from a Jewish perspective, you know, what does it mean to be human? It means so many different things. But, you know, human is one of those words in English that is just so on point. I once saw etymologically human is from the word humus, which means dirt, not hummus, but humus, which is dirt, not as delicious as hummus, but humus, which is dirt. And in Hebrew, of course, Adam, a human is an Adam, because he's from the Adama, which is the dirt. And there's sort of that idea of humanity being recognizing, I guess, that we're from the dirt. We have humble, I think humble also, or humility is from the same etymology. We have very humble origins, and that's sort of just like the reality. And I would love to hear more from you about that.
Yes. So first of all, it's wonderful to be here and to talk about a very important topic of happiness, something that we all strive for. And I think we can gain a lot of insights through language. I think we can get a lot of insight through understanding the etymology of words. And you look at the word Adama, you look at the word for ground, for soil. And what immediately comes to mind is that, you know, soil is where nature takes place. We are intimately tied to nature. And when I talk about giving ourselves the permission to be human, this is what I'm referring to, adhering to our nature. Now, what does that mean? Well, our nature dictates that we have emotions, that we have feelings, that we as human beings, we experience sadness as well as joy. We experience anger as well as love. So when I talk about the giving ourselves the permission to be human, I talk about active acceptance, which means accepting our emotions and then choosing the most appropriate course of action. So for example, if I experience fear, anxiety before starting a project, that fear, that anxiety is natural. And I need to accept it and embrace it as part of being human. At the same time, I can choose whether I act according to that fear or whether I go ahead courageously.
So the choosing is in the behavior.
The important choice revolves around first of all, accepting, embracing the emotion, and then choosing what action we want to take.
Right. So they're like two levels. There's a choice before the choice. There's a choice not to reject how I'm feeling, to acknowledge how I'm feeling. I'm feeling how I'm feeling. And then there's a second choice, perhaps a more even important choice, to choose a behavior. I think you used the word courageous, which would imply even if my feelings are not necessarily aligned with the behavior, but I've accepted the feeling, I feel I am afraid of this action, and I can choose to do it anyway.
Exactly. And you know, in Hebrew, the word for courage is ometz. And the word ometz comes from the same root as the word le'ametz, which means to embrace, to accept. So it is when I embrace the emotion, when I bring it in, when I allow it to flow through me, then I'm in the best position to act courageously with ometz.
It's very interesting. I'm thinking now, because of my background and my training, of the Sefer Tanya, the book of Tanya of the Alter Rebbe, and over there he's talking about this persona called the Beinoni, the in between or middle or average, so-called average. He's really describing a very a real model for living, but he calls it an average person. And how does he distinguish this quote unquote average person from what we call the tzaddik, who's this completely holy person? What's the distinction? The tzaddik has perfect emotions, like some sort of like beyond the normal scale of human emotional experience. Somebody who every feeling they have is totally holy, totally pure. Okay. And then he says, but I'm not talking, that's not my audience. I'm talking to regular people who have a wide range of emotions. And some of those emotions are not so wholesome and not necessarily so productive, but we're not going to worry about that right now. We're going to use your words, embrace the fact that we have all these types of emotions, and then we're going to focus our energies on choosing better behaviors.
In colloquial English, we talk about faking it till we make it, and to fake it means to act as if, even if I'm afraid, I can still act courageously. Even if I feel envy, which most people do at times, I can still act generously and benevolently. And it's the behavior that matters more than the emotion. And in Judaism, there's a lot of talk about shelo lishma ba lishma. In other words, even if I do something, a mitzvah, a good deed, and even if I don't really embrace that good deed, even if I don't truly deeply believe in it, even if I don't really want to do it, but I do it, then over time, that behavior this external behavior will affect my internal thinking and my internal feelings. So it's the behavior, the external, that impacts the internal. And this is what the Tanya was talking about.
Maimonides says that if you are giving charity, now if the recipient needs it all at once, obviously it's best to give it all at once. But let's say you have two alternatives: a person who's going to give a certain sum over the year, and he could give it once, or he could make it a part of his daily practice. Like we put the money in the pushka in the tzedakah box every day, make it a routine. So Maimonides says, break up that same amount. At the end of the year, it's the same amount, but you dole it out over the days, he says, because it conditions the person to become a giver.
I didn't know about this wisdom from Maimonides, but I couldn't agree more. So I often talk to my students and say to them, for example, if you want to start an exercise regime or a meditation regime, it's better to break it up. So 3 minutes a day of meditation is a lot better than an hour over the weekend, or 20 minutes of exercise 5 days a week is a lot better than running a marathon once a month. So breaking it up, this is how you create habits, how you create rituals.
Right. And I just want to clarify, it's not just breaking it up makes it more manageable, more bite-sized, smaller. It's that by breaking it up, you make it more repetitive, and the routine has this transformative effect on the person.
Yeah, John Dryden, the British poet, said back in the 17th century, we first make our habits, and then our habits make us.
Ooh,
so
wow.
It's this kind of repetition that actually leads, and again, today, 21st century, we know how it works inside our brains. Again, the genius of creation, in that as we repeat something over and over again, neural pathways are formed. They create rituals, they create habits.
Wow. If you really want to change yourself deeply, it's more about focusing on the externalities. So from going to the externality of behavior, you actually end up affecting yourself most deeply. I mean, and of course, it's not my novel concept. I'm getting this straight from Tanya, but I think that resonates with your worldview as well.
Very much so. When I graduated with my PhD, my dissertation advisor, Professor Joshua Margolis, gave me a gift. And he gave me Pirkei Avot, the chapter of the fathers. And he inscribed it and wrote, All you'll ever need to know about psychology is right here. And how right he was. And the idea that you just brought up, which really is the essence of the research that we have today on change, on bringing about lasting change, is inherent, well, as you pointed out in the Tanya, as well as in Pirkei Avot. Because in Pirkei Avot, they say, those whose wisdom exceeds their deeds, their wisdom shall not endure. But those whose deeds exceed their wisdom shall endure. In other words, our deeds, our action, they are more important than our thoughts or even our feelings, because it's through our deeds, and once again, repetitive, ritualized deeds. That's how we cultivate. That's how we sculpt the best version of ourselves.
So basically you're saying when somebody says, but Rabbi, I don't believe, why should I put on tefillin every morning? You would say, put on tefillin every morning.
Fake it till you make it.
Fake it till you make it. Wow, that's very powerful.
Or rather, sorry, Rabbi, it's not fake it till you make it, it's fake it till you become it.
Right. Or perhaps even deeper, until you reveal how you always were it. You're bringing out something from inside, and that power of action is externalizing it.
You know, that's interesting. I love that as a metaphor, and it reminds me of a story told about Michelangelo, you know, whose most famous work is David, you know, King David. And Michelangelo was once asked, how did you create something that is so beautiful as you know, as David? And he said, well, it was rather straightforward. I went to the quarry and I saw this piece of marble, and you know, I took this marble, and then all I had to do was chisel away the excess stone. And I think there is a powerful metaphor here for personal transformation.
So the potential you that you want to become, or that maybe even I would say that we have a duty. I would say we have a duty to become this. And we haven't really spoken about this, but it's not a luxury. It's not a nice thing to live our best life, to be happy. It's a duty. And as a rabbi, I'm going to say it, it's a moral duty that we owe it to our maker to live our best life. So I just want to clarify that. But this best self that we're becoming, in essence, that's such a deep concept, but in essence, that's who we are, even if we're not demonstrating it. And then by demonstrating it, meaning by choosing behaviors that are aligned with the essence, then it becomes not only evident behaviorally, but then what happens is our thoughts and emotions become aligned as well. And then we become integrated from our essence through our thoughts and emotions all the way out to the behaviors, which are the most external. You know, that integration, that one straight line where everything is aligned. That's really the goal. I want to just bridge from this concept to another concept, which I think is maybe just a more specific iteration of this idea. Speaking of bringing out our better selves and the fake it until you make it. So I was thinking of a story. There's a story that's told, a wealthy man tells his rabbi, I'm going to stop giving tzedakah. I'm going to stop giving charity, even though it's a mitzvah to give. But he says, I realize that my intentions are not pure. And, you know, when I'm giving, it's self-serving, really. And so I'm going to take a break from giving charity until my intentions are pure. And the rabbi says, when you give, your intentions may not be pure, but the poor man who eats because you gave, his intentions are very pure. So it's not about you. But the recipient, I assure you, when he's able to eat, his intentions are very pure. So I wanted to talk a little bit about giving.
Yeah, you know, so I talk a lot about giving in my lectures and write a lot about it. when I talk about happiness, because it's such a central, and you used the word essence before, I would say an essential element of a happy life. So let me share with you just a fun study. This was run as a joint venture between the University of British Columbia and Harvard Business School, where they brought people into the lab and they measured their levels of happiness. Today we can do it pretty well. We know what a happy brain looks like. We know, we know what questions to ask to determine people's levels of well-being. So they ascertained their levels of happiness, and then they gave them a nice sum of money. And with the money, they told them, go buy something for yourself. And they did. And they went out and they bought themselves gadget or shoes or whatever. And they came back to the lab and they measured their levels of happiness again. And they found that happiness levels went up significantly. But then they invited them a day later to the lab and they measured their levels of happiness again. And what they found was that the happiness levels went right back down to where they were before. In other words, a temporary spike as a result of shopping.
A high. Right.
A high. Second group of people came into the same lab, measured their levels of happiness again, got the same amount of money, and were then told to go spend that money, only this time on someone else. And they did. And they bought someone else a meal, someone who needed it. They bought their friend a gift, whatever, charity, whatever they wanted to do with it, they did with it, spending it on someone else. And then they went back to the lab, they measured their levels of happiness, and indeed it increased to the same degree as the shoppers before, with one very big difference, which is the following day when they measured their levels of happiness, it was still significantly higher than it was at the beginning. Even after a week, you could still notice the impact of giving. And this research, and there are hundreds more with similar results showing the benefits of giving, point to wisdom that exists in our tradition, in our language. The word to give comes from the root natan. Natan in Hebrew and in Roman letters is a palindrome, meaning it reads the same way, right to left and left to right. In Hebrew letters, it would be nun taf nun. In Roman letters, it would be N-A-T-A-N. Left to right, right to left. No coincidence here. Because when we give, we receive right back, usually with interest.
It's interesting bringing this back to the idea of embracing our nature. There's a story that there was an Israeli soldier who actually he slowly started to embrace Jewish observance, and then eventually he moved to America. He was living in Chicago, and the shliach there brought him to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and he met the Rebbe, and the Rebbe asked him a question. There's a whole backstory which I won't tell at this time, but the Rebbe asked this person, you know that in Judaism we give centrality to the right side. We give emphasis to the right side. Even when you get dressed, you're supposed to put on, your right sleeve first, and everything we emphasize the right side. So when God made the human being, you have two central organs, the brain and the heart. So the brain is central, literally, it's located centrally. The heart should have also been located centrally, and yet it's shifted. And if it's going to be shifted to the right side, which is the primary side. Why is the heart shifted to the left side, which is the weaker side or the secondary side? So the Rebbe asked him this question. He'd never thought about that, and he couldn't come up with an answer. So the Rebbe answered and said, because the whole purpose of a heart's not just to pump blood. A heart is the seat of emotion. Emotions are for others. God gives us emotions so that we can connect to others. So my heart is on the right side. Your right side, when I face you in love and kindness, my heart is exactly where it belongs, on the recipient's right side, because my heart isn't for me. My heart is so that I can connect to you. In other words, The point here is, it is the most natural thing to give. Giving isn't something that you do after you've achieved everything. Oh, now we have something left over that I'm not using for myself. Now let me give. No, it is the most natural thing. We are literally designed by our maker. We are built with evidence that giving is natural to us. And that, I would add, if we don't live consistently with that, we cause distress, we cause dis-ease by not giving.
You know, there is, I couldn't agree more with that. There is a lot of work today on helping at-risk population, you know, people, individuals, groups who are in need. One of the things that we've learned, and there are quite a few programs to that effect in Israel and increasingly more around the world, that the best way to help people is to help them help others. So even for the person in need, the ultimate giving, the ultimate thing that we can do for them is to help them give others. Now, why is that so important? You know, when psychologists talk about depression, which, by the way, levels of depression are on the rise. They're, as far as we know, the highest that they've ever been. So when we talk about depression, what we're talking about is an idea that Professor Marty Seligman from University of Pennsylvania introduced, which is learned helplessness. When people feel helpless about where they are in life and what they can do or cannot do, this is when they become depressed. Now, what we're doing for other people when we're helping them help others is we're helping them shift from being helpless to helpful.
Oh, I love that.
We're helping them shift from hopeless to hopeful. And
Wow.
the difference between sadness and depression is that depression is sadness without hope. And when people become helpful, they also become hopeful.
Wow. Wow. That's remarkable. You know, it also strikes me that it's empowering because I don't have any control over what others are going to give me. And if my happiness is based on that, I'm very much I'm a victim right from the outset. But I have absolute control over how giving, how generous I am. So I've empowered myself. When I choose what I give as opposed to what I get as the main criterion of success, now I've shifted the goalposts, so to speak, but in an empowering way, where now did I have a good day? Well, let's see, how much did I give? I can always control. I don't control what I get, but I control what I give. So it's also, you know, it gives me power back.
Yeah, and you know, just the notion that that I have control. Psychologists talk about locus of causality or locus of control. Just this notion in and of itself is associated, linked to a happier life, a healthier life, in fact. By the way, healthier psychologically as well as physically.
Yeah, it's all aligned, obviously. Yeah. So the locus of causality, that when you feel that you are a cause in this world as opposed to an effect, you are mentally, emotionally, physically healthier. You know, you refer sometimes to Viktor Frankl's work. I mean, he's obviously the one who really made that idea, you know, you can't choose your circumstances, but you can choose your reaction. You can choose. There's a great Hasidic story that I would love to share with you. And there's a missing piece of this Hasidic story because I don't know what access they had behind the Iron Curtain in the 60s to Frankel's work. And I would love to discover, maybe someone out there who's an expert could help us uncover this. But there was a Chabad Chassid named Reb Mendel Futterfass, and he was sent to Siberia because he was getting Jews out of Russia. And 14 years he was in a forced labor camp. And he told a story to a teacher of mine. That teacher told me the story. Reb Mendel said that there was a professor. You know, the communists were suspicious of intellectuals. So Reb Mendel was there as a religious Jew. There was this professor who was there. And then the rest of them were just common criminals. So this professor told Reb Mendel reported that this professor said to him one day, he says, I look around and I see young men who are relatively healthy. And one morning they don't get up off the cot to go to the day of slave labor. And we come back at the end of the day and they're dead. And I don't think they died of disease or starvation or of injury. I think they gave up the will to live. He says, now I look at you in contrast. You have a certain joie de vivre. You have a certain, zest for life, which is contagious. And I'm trying to figure out the difference between why this situation has broken them to the point of death, and it doesn't break you. So Reb Mendel says to this professor, he says, listen, these guys that we're in prison here with, he says, I want to just tell you, most of them, who are they? They're Cossacks. Now, what is that, from a Jewish cultural historical perspective? A Cossack is not the, we know what that evokes. He's like, these are ruffians. These are, of the lowest order. He says, for these guys, do you know what life is? Life is three things: a horse, a rifle, and a bottle of vodka. That's life. Now, when they're sent here, they don't have their horse, they don't have their rifle, and they don't have their bottle of vodka. So the three things which constitute life were taken from them. So essentially life was taken from them. And it's only a matter of time before the body gets the memo from the mind that I'm dead already. And that's the morning that they don't get up off the cot. Reb Mendel says to this professor, he says, but you see me, what did they take from me? Now, the man didn't see his wife and children for 14 years. He was working as a slave in a labor camp. He says, but what did they take from me? What's life? Life is you try your best to serve God. Okay, so like back home, I worked in an office, and you see the sun is setting, which means it's time to pray the afternoon prayer. We call it mincha, the afternoon prayer. It's time to. So back home, you would go to the synagogue or wherever and you'd pray. He says, here, the sun is setting. I'm working. Now, I'm not working in an office. I'm working out in the tundra. There's someone pointing a gun at you while you're working. But the sun is setting. Same sun, same afternoon prayer. Now, there's nowhere to go to go pray, but you pray while you're working. He says, now I can't actually pray out loud because they'll shoot me. But in my mind, I silently pray. And it's the same prayer. It's the same everything. He says, but in fact, in some ways, it's even better because while I'm standing there doing my work and I'm praying the afternoon prayer, I think to myself, wow, in all the years since God made this earth, I bet you no one stood on this exact spot and related his praise. So you see, life is about serving God the best you can. They haven't taken that from me. And in some ways, I can actually do it even better under this, under these circumstances. So I think there's something so Jewish, if I can say so, about historically the Jewish people have been through. I mean, if you're a people for as long as the Jewish people have been, you've been through everything. You've been through everything, and the fluctuation, the vicissitudes of circumstances is unparalleled, and yet there's a certain ability to remain masters, to have a mastery of our inner world by defining what is a good life as something that nobody can take away from us. And I would love to hear you talk about that.
So, about Viktor Frankl, who spent time in Auschwitz, in the concentration camp, he experienced a sense of meaning. And that sense of meaning kept him, and according to his understanding of human psychology, it also kept many others alive. And the story that you relayed is very similar. It's through a sense of meaning and purpose that the rabbi, in the most difficult of circumstances, was able to not just survive, but according to him, even thrive. In other words, the internal matters a great deal. Our interpretation of the world matters a great deal. And specifically, it's the sense of meaning and purpose that we have when we wake up in the morning, as we go through the day. Albert Camus, the French philosopher,
existentialist,
once said, he was an existentialist, an atheist. He once said, at every moment in my life, I have to make a decision. Do I have a cup of coffee or do I kill myself?
Mm-hmm.
And for a person without an inherent sense of meaning and purpose in life, life, even if it's not in a concentration camp or in the gulag, life is challenging because one constantly has to generate a reason for being. And again, Albert Camus took it to the extreme and hopefully at least half in jest. However, this is a very important message. And the question is, can we find that sense of meaning, that sense of purpose in our lives? And Jews throughout history have found it in serving God. It's also one of the most effective ways of generating meaning and purpose is giving, serving other people, helping other people, contributing. And that generates in and of itself a sense of meaning and purpose. And as Viktor Frankl quotes in his book, when you have a what for, a why to live for, every how becomes possible. You can overcome every obstacle. And it's the why, the reason for being, that is so critical for a sense of meaning in life, for resilience, for overcoming hardship, and of course for happiness. The science of happiness can help us a great deal in becoming more resilient, helping us to overcome difficulties and hardship. So we talked about how important it is to have a sense of meaning and purpose in life. Another element, and again, there's a lot of research showing this, that the most important thing that we can do to become stronger, more resilient, is cultivating relationships. And I remember as a student and later as a faculty member at Harvard, spending hours upon hours, week after week, at the beautiful home of the Chabad Rabbi and Rebbetzin, Rabbi Hershey and Elki Zarchi. And it was just such a memorable experience. And I know that even if I had a tough week, studying or later teaching, I knew that, on Shabbat I would go and spend time with like-minded and like-hearted people where I would be supported and held. And that gives a lot of strength, a great deal of courage to move on. So relationships, supportive relationships, community is so important, always, especially in difficult times.
Just to bring this back to the idea of action, the why and the what are somewhat inextricably linked, at least from a Jewish perspective. The why are we here? So from a Jewish perspective, especially a Hasidic perspective, we would say, well, we're here to make this world holier than heaven. Of course, we believe in an afterlife. Primarily, we're here to make this world holier than heaven. And we call that Mashiach. The perfection of this world, the messianic world, means this world. It's not an afterlife. It's not a heaven. We also believe in heaven. But this world becoming perfected, which means in a real objectifiable sense. It's not some enlightenment that is subjectively experienced by enlightened people. We mean there's world peace, literally. There is plenty and abundance in the most material, literal sense. This world, there's no disease, there's no famine, there's no war. And so how do we bring about a world that is refined in the most material sense through material action? Through material action. In other words, it's all well and good to have the right intention, to have the right feelings, but it comes down to action, physical action. So it's not just that the physical action is the mechanism, but it's strongly married to the underlying motivation, the meaning of life. The meaning of life is not what kind of level of heaven you're going to go to after 120 years. The meaning of life is making this world tangibly better for others. And we do that, again, through tangible actions, through observable, empirically obvious actions. You get up, you go out, you take care of somebody. It's not about what you think. It's not about what you feel. I mean, that has an effect on our actions. But ultimately, the emphasis is Hamaisehu ha'ikar, like the Lubavitcher Rebbe used to always say. The action is the main thing. Not just because it's what we can control, but because it's ultimately, that's the goal. I'm saying on a global, on a macro scale, that is the goal.
Yeah, and this is quite challenging, quite difficult for many people to understand. If I experience envy towards my best friend, that doesn't make me a bad person. The question is, how do I behave? If I choose to act generously and benevolently towards my best friend, well, that's moral behavior. So once again, it's the action that trumps our emotions, that trumps even our thoughts, even though actions are often determined by our thoughts. Ultimately, it's our actions that matter.
I remember as a kid, they asked Jimmy Carter about his personal life. And he said, I lost it in my heart, which as a Baptist, that makes a lot of sense. From a Jewish perspective, that's a silly answer. From a Jewish perspective, that would be like someone comes up to you and says, did you eat on Yom Kippur? And you say, well, I felt hungry in my stomach. Okay, you felt hungry. It's a sensation. You felt hungry. You didn't eat, right? I lost it in my heart. Okay, congratulations. Those emotions are human.
Yes.
Behavior. What's your behavior?
Yeah, I find it interesting that I go back to Pirkei Avot, and it says, Al shlosha dvarim ha'olam omed, on three things the world rests. Torah, avodah, and gemilut chasadim, on the Torah, on work, and on charity. And I find it interesting that, Torah is first, and Torah also comes from the word to teach. So the teachings, the cognitive element, the thinking, the reflection, which is important, and then there is the physical work, and then it culminates. The ultimate physical work is the giving, the generosity, the charity.
Well, let me point out, this is very interesting because avodah primarily means avodah shebelev. Avodah shebelev, which is prayer. But prayer doesn't mean, I think, the way many people translate prayer. Prayer isn't just supplication. Prayer is emotional work. You're trying to arrange and organize your emotions, refine your emotions. So Torah is like the worldview. It's very called cognitive. Avodah shebelev, the work of the heart, which is the emotional work. And then gemilut chasadim, that's the behavioral.
Oh.
And really, yeah.
Well, I love that. I never made that connection, but in psychology, we talk about the ABC of psychology. The A is the affect, that's the emotion. The B is the behavior. The C is the cognition. So in Torah, Avodah, and Gemilut Chasadim, you actually have the ABC of psychology. You have the cognitive, that's the C. You have the affective, that's the heart, and you have the behavioral. And the behavioral, our most important work is once again, giving, charity. And having said that, it's giving, it's helping not just others, it's also helping ourselves. Hillel said, if I'm not for myself, who will be for me? But if I'm only for myself, who am I? And if not now, then when? But this is the idea that we mustn't neglect the self. And for me, this is a very important point because many people would say to me, the whole science of happiness or wanting to be happy or joyful, that's a selfish pursuit. And my response to that is yes, it is, and there is a lot more. Because by pursuing my happiness, what I'm also doing is indirectly helping others, because we know, and we know it from personal experience, but also from a lot of research that's out there today. When I increase my levels of happiness, when I rejoice, I'm much more likely to contribute to others, to help others, to have the energy to give, to want to give.
And vice versa, because you said if you contribute, you're happier. So if you're happier, you contribute. If you contribute,
exactly, there is a self-reinforcing loop. There is a self-reinforcing loop between giving to oneself, giving to others. This is the upward spiral of generosity. And unfortunately, in English at least, there is a schism between selfish and selfless. And unfortunately, these two don't meet in our language. But as Rabbi Hillel pointed out, we need the combination. You know, if I'm not for myself, who will be for me? In other words, be selfish. But if I'm only for myself, who am I? In other words, be selfless or be generous. And if not now, then when? Bring the two together. And rather than selfish or selfless, I think we should be talking about being self-full. I think this had Rabbi Hillel spoken English, I'm sure he would make up the word self-full as linking, bridging the two together. Yes, pursue your happiness, and yes, Gmilut Chasadim, charity, is an important part of that pursuit.
So we come to another paradox. We can't escape paradox.
We're Jewish.
We're Jewish. Always going to be paradox. So we take care of ourselves so that we can take care of others. So we can better take care of ourselves. We can better take care of others. And again, I want to reiterate that we have a very the word in English would be which really comes from Spanish, but we have a very quixotic worldview as Jews. Quixotic comes from Don Quixote, and I heard a theory, by the way, that Cervantes was actually a crypto Jew. So, which I like that because, you know, to dream the impossible dream, you know, that which was from the Man of La Mancha, but that's based on Don Quixote, that idea of just the impossible dream, right? So we do have this this crazy worldview that not only can we make life better for ourselves, but we can make it better for the entire world, and objectively better, not just, you know, to convince people to be more comfortable with life as it is. We have this quixotic, crazy goal that we can actually, through the, again, a paradox, combination of inner work and outer work, make life better for the world. You know, it's, what I'm trying to say is that this is not just about self-help and having a better life. There is something very ultimately magnanimous and service-driven about this whole approach.
You know, I often ask my students to start with their dreams. And I ask them, you know, what are your dreams? What are your ideals? And I remember years ago, one of my students said to me, you know, I'm not a dreamer. I'm not an idealist. I'm a realist. And my response to him was that to be an idealist is to be a realist. Because once again, part of our nature is to dream. Part of our nature is to have ideals. And when we wake up in the morning with ideals, then we're much more likely not just to be happy, but also to act and to achieve and to contribute to the betterment of our world. You know, when we talk about tikkun olam happens in the world. It happens outside of ourselves, when inside we have those dreams, we have those ideals. From the inside out, sof ma'aseh b'machshava tchila, when an action, a deed begins here, and then the deed takes place outside, and it reinforces what's inside, that reinforces the action, and so on in an upward spiral. The whole world is made of circles, of spirals. And we just need to facilitate, to allow nature to take its course, not to block it, to let the emotions flow, to let the thoughts flow, to act and to think, to act and to think continuously.
So it seems to be saying, you're saying that dreaming is not only healthy, but essential, necessary. We have to have dreams. which you might think is like antithetical with happiness. Just accept life as it is, like be better at coping. And you're saying there is something necessary about imagining ourselves and others and the world better than it is.
Because the difference between sadness and depression is that depression is sadness without hope. And what is hope? Hope is about having dreams. Hope is about having an ideals, believing in them.
It's amazing how it comes full circle, because a dream, a hope, a vision, I think Helen Keller said, what's worse than being blind is having sight but no vision, right? A vision is something you're imagining that doesn't exist in the world, not just something you haven't seen. I haven't been to the Great Wall of China, but I've seen pictures, so I can imagine it. But then imagine if no Great Wall of China exists, right? You're imagining a perfect world that doesn't yet exist. So on the one hand, dreaming is the most separate, most rarefied. It's so off the charts away from reality. And yet those dreams inform our behaviors, which are the most grounded, most objectifiable, readily observable. And then the actions lead to the dream becoming fulfilled in reality. And I don't think we can get more Jewish than that. Like the high dreams with the most tangible actions looping into each other.
Rabbi, it's so, Rabbi, what you say is so important. If you think about it, human beings have landed a man on the moon. We have built skyscrapers. We have advanced in medicine. We've done really wonderful things as a species. Now imagine if we take, and we've done it all because we dreamt of landing a man on the moon. We dreamt about those tall buildings, and we made them into a reality. Imagine if we apply this faculty of dreaming to the internal world, to the betterment of the human, to the chiseling out of the best version of ourselves and the best version of our society. How far could we get? How high could we climb? How much better and more could we achieve?
Wow. Well, may I say that you are truly doing God's work, and one person at a time. I guess that's what it's about, really transforming the world. And we do believe we have that impossible dream that this can be a reality for all of us, for each and every one of us.
Amen. Thank you very much, Rabbi. This really has been wonderful, and I'm honored to be part of this very important project of giving and contributing and making our world, our olam, a better place.
Thank you so much.